Evening, a small temple in the wilderness. Inside, there were only two people. A female voice said that last night she had a strange dream in which the goddess Guanyin asked her to come to the temple. The woman asked her husband to repeat the prayer she would say after her, and he just sighed. The woman folded her hands in front of her and began to ask the goddess to give them at least one child. The man looked at his wife and thought that since their child died, his wife had gone crazy. Sometimes she comes to her senses, and sometimes she is delirious because in reality they were already too old. They could have had children. After all, he understood perfectly well that children never fall from the sky. But in this case, everything turned out completely differently. The woman looked at her husband and noticed that his gaze was fixed on something. She wanted to know what was wrong with him. What happened next, none of them could even imagine. Someone fell right in front of them. They only managed to cover their faces. The two old men saw nothing at that moment because they closed their eyes in fear and were afraid to open them. In front of them sat a guy. His name was Han Shen. He was 19 years old. He touched his head and thought it was very painful. The guy opened one eye and saw an unknown place. He didn't understand where he was and was even more surprised by what he was wearing. The next moment, unexpectedly for the guy, someone grabbed his hand and hugged it very tightly. The woman began to scream that a miracle had happened and the goddess Guanyin had given them a child. Her husband tried to stop her, but he couldn't do it. Then he wondered if the gods had really performed a miracle. This guy suddenly pulled his hand out of the woman's hand, asking her who she was and why she was acting like that. Then he started yelling at her to take her hands off him, and at that moment he raised his voice at her. The woman couldn't resist and gave the guy a slap on the back of the head with her foot, shouting that he was an ordinary asshole and how dare he talk to his mother like that. Then the woman's maternal instinct kicked in, and she punched her husband so that he wouldn't dare hit her son. The guy, watching this whole picture and understanding that all this was happening because of him, shouted to the two of them that it was enough. At that moment, the guy suddenly noticed what these people were wearing. After all, they were wearing ancient clothes. In his time, no one dressed like that anymore. Then he realized that something was wrong here. The guy realized that he most likely ended up in another world and something happened to him, but he didn't remember it. After some time, they all went together to their home in carts. The man told the guy that it means he came to them from a world that is beyond the heavens. To which the guy replied, that you can say that too. Besides, the guy also said that he lost his memory and he can't fully tell everything that happened. He only remembered that he was 19 years old and that his name was Han Shen, and he also remembered that in the world he lived in, he did very hard work. But he couldn't answer the question of why he had to work so much. He only remembered that he did it. And he also couldn't remember who his family was and who his friends were. He didn't remember these people at all. He also didn't remember why he ended up in another world. He didn't know the answers to these questions at all. The woman ignored everything this guy said. She only thought that he most likely wanted to eat and she was ready to cook him whatever he wanted. The man at that moment looked at the guy and said that he thought they should go to the same place first. After some time, they were near Mount Wuzun and were heading towards the Eastern Academy. When they were already in the academy itself, a girl came out to them and the girl said that she was Han Shen, indeed, their academy's uniform. And she also added that judging by the fact that they told him and chose heaven, and her assistant thought that this was another tramp. Then the girl who was the master said that they could quickly find out the truth, but he should know that for lying he would be punished. She ordered him to come up to the crystal and touch it. The guy obediently did what she told him. He thought that, to be honest, they didn't look like bad people at all, and that's why he wasn't afraid of them. That's why he decided to touch the crystal with one hand, since it was easier for him to do what they asked. He also wanted to know what would follow inside the crystal. He saw his reflection and thought that except for his hairstyle and clothes, nothing had changed. The guy who was with the master said that the crystal does not react in any way, which means that this is another scammer. The girl master shouted that she was happy and that punishment awaited him. At that moment, the guy felt something incomprehensible to himself. It was a strange feeling. In fact, the ancient crystal that determines the chosen from this or that person contributing to the awakening of the forces was a legendary item. He began to hear voices closer and closer. Looking around, he wanted to know who was speaking and where he was. This unknown voice then said that it means he chose him. These words were completely incomprehensible to him. Then in the depths, he saw a ghost who continued to tell him that he was weaker than he imagined. And also this ghost warrior said that he is still worthy of wielding his power since he is still very weak. But the clouds added that gradually he would get used to it and everything would start to work out for him. Then he heard other voices that began to shout "Lord, new Lord," and approach him. He didn't understand who they all were. He was very scared and they shouted at him, "Sir." After a few seconds, they all approached him and started touching him with their hands. He thought that he couldn't move. It seemed as if they were holding his eye so that he couldn't close it on his own and could see everything that was happening. When he woke up, he saw in front of him that very crystal to which he extended his hand and touched. This crystal reacted. The same guy removed his hand. I understand that everything he just saw was because of this crystal. The girl master smiled and said that the mother crystal had reacted and the guy should continue. His current mother wanted to know if everything was okay with him. Han Shen was very surprised. Holding his hand, he asked again, does she really want him to continue? Most likely, she wants to kill him. The master turned her head and looked at the assistant and told Xiao Song to help him, and the guy answered well. Xiao Song covered his mouth with 2 fingers after saying that they should do the armor awakening. After all, he needed to pass the mortal rank at that moment so that he could master the 9th level armor. Han Shen thought, how could this be? Armor suddenly appeared on him. Xiao Song pushed off from the spot and made a jump, which was completely unexpected for the guy. And he already felt Xiao Song standing behind him and holding his hands. Han Shen didn't understand what was happening and asked what he was doing. The guy thought that this assistant was too strong and he couldn't break free. Xiao Song asked him for forgiveness. And immediately after that, holding the guy's hand in his hand, he extended it back to the crystal. This crystal immediately reacted to it differently than the first time. The very next second, the crystal threw the 2 of them to the side at a great distance. Those watching this did not understand what was happening, but they wanted to see everything until the very end. After the crystal threw the guy away, armor appeared on the place of the clothes that he was wearing. He extended his hand forward. Now, all that was left for him to do was to receive a weapon in accordance with his rank as a ruler. The guys were wearing level 1 armor, but it wasn't clear when they first woke up that they were wearing only level 1 armor. Well then, why did he get a weapon and additional power along with the armor? At this moment, Han Shen's eyes seemed to glow with fire. He did not understand what was happening, and he was ready to attack. Xiao Song, being completely unarmed, tried to tell him that he shouldn't do that. Xiao Song shouted at the last moment for him to stop, but it seemed like the guy didn't hear him. And just a second later, he struck him so hard that Xiao Song's armor flew in different directions and threw him back. The master thought that this guy had pierced wooden-level armor with 1 blow. The guy definitely had talent, even though he lacked practice. She also understood that now his mind was being destroyed by the armor. At that moment, his new mother stood up and shouted for him to stop. Well, it seemed like the guy didn't understand who was who and considered all these people enemies, and he turned his head, after which, without thinking twice, he directed the spear that was in his hands towards her. The man extended his hand forward and shouted at his wife to be as careful as possible. The spear that the guy threw towards the woman was very close to her. Xiao Song was an assistant teacher at the academy, the best first-year student and the class leader. His weakness was that he underestimated his opponent due to his arrogance, like this time using wooden armor. The spear had almost reached its target and was near the woman's head, and in another moment it could have killed her. Suddenly a master appeared near the spear and intercepted the spear and prevented this blow. The handle of the spear that she grabbed broke into 2 parts, 1 remained in her hand, and the girl directed the second part towards Han Lin, who shouted that it should fly back. The guy didn't expect such a turn of events and was a little surprised to see that his own weapon was pointed in his direction. This made him very angry, and he managed to turn away at the last moment so that it wouldn't hit him. Well, since he was very angry with the girl, he decided that he should attack her. The next moment he tried to pounce on her, but he did it without a weapon. The master, foreseeing such a situation, easily extended 1 hand forward, putting up a defense so that he could not break through it. And then the bro's hand directed the force that she concentrated in her hand towards him, so that his armor was pierced. The guy was flying backwards. I don't understand what was happening to him. He no longer had any protection. He was just falling. At that moment, he came to his senses and again thought about what had happened to him. But again, he didn't remember anything. In fact, the carrier successfully established a connection. The battle system was activated. He did not understand where he was. He could also see that the carrier was given a reward for connecting, and it was the will of the battle. He thought that most likely it was a breakdown in consciousness. He also had a task to explore the mysterious library. He decided that he should try. But at that moment, as soon as he agreed, all the pictures before his eyes disappeared. He didn't understand how this happened because he still had a lot of questions. Raising his head, he saw a woman and a man. The woman rushed to him joyfully, shouting that he was okay. The guy wanted to know where he was. Then the man said that the academy had arranged for him to be in this place. He lay unconscious 2 o'clock. Then the guy thought that he most likely passed out. His head was splitting. It was not a dream at all. The woman came closer to him, and began to ask him if he was in a lot of pain. She was also interested in the question. He was hungry and she was ready to feed him. The man shouted at her to calm down. After all, he thought that he no longer needed feeding. He was old enough. He thought that his wife was again in trouble with her head. The woman said that it was all nonsense and he was still a baby to her. Then the man said if that's the case, then he thinks the guy wants to drink. He turned his head, winked at the guy, and asked if he really wanted a drink. The guy understood his new father and said that it was true. A glass of water would be enough for him. After which his new father said that, by the way, he almost ruined everything. If it weren't for Teacher Lu, it would have been a complete failure. Then the guy thought that most likely it was about that same strong girl who had rejected him. It was Mrs. Liu Nanjiao, the youngest teacher at the Eastern Academy. She had just arrived. She had a great appearance, but at the same time a hot temper and incredible strictness in teaching. Her father told him that she would be his teacher. He was very surprised that she would really be his teacher, and in that case it would turn out that he would study. His mother handed him a glass of water and told him to drink it. His father said that the Eastern Academy is a school for training a warrior. In this place he can study without fear, and they will visit him. The boy asked his father that he wanted to meet Mrs. Liu. Right at that moment, his mother hugged him and said that he was a very sweet boy. Since he wanted to meet the lady, he had no choice but to go and carry out his mission. After some time, they met on one of the suspension bridges. The lady asked if he had decided to visit her at night just for the sake of going to the library. He replied that this is exactly how he wants to know more about this world. He decided that until he figured out the system, it would be best to keep it a secret. The lady replied that the library really does have a lot of books about this world, but it takes time to study them all. She is ready to tell him briefly. In the world in which it is located, this continent is called the continent of battle, and this place is filled with spiritual energy, and in this place live a variety of creatures. People in this place have a chance to awaken the power of armor and become the owner of combat armor. In addition to enhancing physical strength, they gain various skills. However, there is also negative energy such as anger, which can turn into something more, namely these demons of cataclysms. They are ruthless, greedy for blood, and extremely dangerous. The lady also said that it is thanks to the battles of warriors in armor that the world will continue to exist. At that moment, she showed the house where she lives and said that she needs to work, but he can stay here, and he thanked her. Approaching the library, he thought that the world was in danger if he received such a task. Now he needed to check if there was anything in the books about the mother of memory, and maybe there was an ability to return his memories. At that moment, he opened the doors and saw two fiery eyes of a creature that was heading straight towards him. He stopped. I don't understand what's going on because no one warned that the library could be dangerous. When the library door opened, a huge tiger with fiery eyes and huge claws jumped out. I don't understand how this happened. The guy felt a weapon appear in his hand. He held in his hand the same spear that he had once held, and that was why he was able to hold the tiger. It seemed that the tiger was not going to stop and was about to break through his defense. The guy was a little scared because he didn't know how to behave in such a situation and what to do with the tiger. Even at some point, he thought that this tiger was too strong and he wouldn't be able to hold out against it for very long. What he thought about was that he needed to equip the armor as quickly as possible. Only then the tiger would not harm him. At that moment, someone intervened in their clash. This man raised his hand and shouted the tiger quite. It was an old man who came out of the library. He said the tiger where his manners stopped like an obedient kitten. The old man was a librarian and his name was Mr. Zhang. He asked the guy if he was accidentally injured and called him a divine child. The guy was very surprised, so he asked the librarian if he knew who he was. The librarian said that Miss Liu had already informed the entire faculty about who he was. The librarian said he should have kept it a secret. Then the guy asked why you were in the building, tiger. The librarian replied that it seemed that the divine child did not yet know Gudan. This is his companion and guardian spirit. He always accompanies him and guards the library. On the tiger's floor, only because his smell was alien to him, but without his permission, he would not have done anything serious. And as for the book on memory restoration, in 30 years of working in the library, he had never heard of such a book. The guy thought that honestly it wasn't that important anymore. His memories were fragmentary anyway, and he wasn't sure if he should even remember the past. At this moment, the guy himself unexpectedly asked if he really thought he was handsome. This somehow even made the librarian happy. He said that he knew how to flatter, and when he was young, no one could compare to him. The guy thought that he actually didn't say anything. He just silently looked at him, and the librarian's behavior seemed strange to him. Although Mr. Zhang was indeed a bit strange, he could be relied upon. He helped the boy find a book to better understand this world. The history of mankind on this continent, known as the martial arts continent, is very similar to the history of the Blue Star, and the timeline is too complicated. When he started reading the armor skill description, he noticed that it was filled with small, insignificant details, and it was simply impossible to remember all this information. He came to the conclusion that he was most interested in legends, and in this world there is a history that is passed down from generation to generation. That the evil spirits that are hiding in this world will one day break out, and when this happens, the world will plunge into chaos. Even if more warriors in armor appear, it will not be enough to contain all the disasters. It was clear that this continent was doomed and would eventually be wiped off the face of the earth. Or only the chosen ones, not sent from heaven, are able to prevent disaster. This legend said that everything would happen at the very moment when the stone and the sound would begin to resonate. A board popped up in front of him saying that the library research task had been completed and he had received the Eye of Insight award. And then he realized that this was not a dream. The librarian asked the guy something was wrong, to which he replied that he sees the very thing that is in front of him. The librarian said he didn't understand what he was talking about, so the guy asked him to forget it. The very next day, all the students gathered for classes at the academy on the mountain. On one side there were guys, and on the other side there were girls. The lady came out to them. Miss Lu said if the newbies are all in place before they start training, she has an important message. The lady said that their group has a new addition, and another student named Han Shen will be training with them. One of the guys thought that this was just a normal training that Xiaosong always leads while helping the teacher, so why is the lady herself here this time? One of the girls couldn't take her eyes off the newcomer, thinking how handsome he was and how strong he was. The lady told her disciples to clear a place in the row and stand in place when Han Shen came. Miss Liu also informed all her students that this time the training would be basic, and students would not be allowed to use armor. The guy, when he stood in line, thought what kind of training was this because he had only just entered this world yesterday. And another one of the girls looked at him. She thought that the difficulty of the training had been reduced. Was the guy they had introduced to such a weakling? The other two guys were talking to each other. One thought that Mrs. Liu singled out the newcomer among everyone. She even put him in the center. Another thought that he entered this academy to win Liu's heart, and this newbie bastard took all her attention. He looked at this guy and thought that he would definitely have to deal with him, otherwise she would not look at him at all. Miss Liu told her students that when they entered the training ground, they should just walk straight. She also added that after passing through the forest zone, the training will be finished. She reminded that according to tradition, the last one to reach the finish line will receive a punishment, and clarified that everyone heard. The guys standing next to Han Shen lowered their heads and said in one voice, exactly like that. Han Shen had no choice but to repeat the same thing they were doing. When Miss Liu heard confirmation from her students, she said that the training was starting. Immediately after these words, everyone rushed to run away. Everyone wanted to reach the finish line as quickly as possible. At that moment, the guy thought that most likely this training was testing speed and endurance. He ended up at the very end. It seemed to him that everyone in this group was so strong that even the girls easily overtook him. At that moment, he thought that judging by his memory, he was used to hard work. But then why was he weaker than others? The guy continued to move forward. Everything that happened simply humiliated him. But he did not understand what kind of training they had. After running a few more meters, he heard small stones start to fall from above. And right after these small stones, huge boulders began to fall right where the students were running. Han Shen became a little tense when he saw those huge rocks falling down. And he was also surprised to see how the students who were with him walked around these stones. The guy even stopped at some point. He thought that most likely they were making fun of him because it was impossible to get through. He raised his head up and saw one of these stones falling right on him. He thought that he was finished. He didn't know what to do, but he saw one of the girls who was with him in the group. It was the same girl he liked. She jumped up and smashed that huge rock with one blow above him. Instead of a huge stone, many small fragments of this stone rained down on him. He covered his head, after which this girl landed right in front of him, and he remained standing behind. The girl turned her head, looked at him, and said that a beginner should not relax just because it is basic training. And she also said that he should remember about discipline. This is the main thing. He should try his best. The guy saw that her name was Baozi. At that moment, he said that he agreed with her, but also thought that he now sees data from others. The girl didn't talk to him for long. She ran forward, and he continued to stand and think that she saved him. At that moment, the guy felt someone put a hand on his shoulder from behind and addressed him as a newbie. It was another one of the guys who asked him if he was nervous, he needed to relax, and everything would be fine. And also this guy told him to try to keep up with everyone to see the last one to get punished. Han Shen didn't understand when he ended up behind him. He didn't even notice it. It is unclear why the Eye of Insight did not work on him. It seems the system had its own rules for calculations. This training ground was so big that everyone immediately scattered. The guy stopped and decided that he needed to open his character panel. He read his name, age, and overall combat performance rating. He didn't understand what kind of nonsense the system was just mocking him without armor. He couldn't even assess the real level of strength. Oh, at that moment he felt something approaching from above, but he still didn't understand what it was. He raised his head up and saw that it was a huge log that was falling right on top of him. Having escaped the blow of this log, the guy thought that he almost got into trouble. Now he needed to figure out how many traps there were here. The very next moment he received 100 experience points for avoiding the trap. He thought if this is so, then he can improve his characteristics. At that moment, a wild pain pierced his entire body. He did not understand what was wrong with him. He grabbed his shoulder and only just realized that it was hurting very sharply. At this moment, the poisoning reaction was detected, and the passive skill basic poison resistance level was activated, and the antibody production process began. The guy thought that poisoning meant, but he remembered that the same guy who grabbed him by the shoulder most likely poisoned him. He didn't have time to recover from the pain in his shoulder when he raised his head and saw that some objects were moving towards him at high speed. Looking closely at them, he saw that they were arrows, and they were all aimed at him. One of the arrows hit his face and left a mark. He was unable to escape the trap, so he received 0 experience points, after which he began to move away from 1/2 third arrow. For this, he received 30 experience points for avoiding the trap, and then another 30. The guy thought that because of the anemia in his body, he couldn't move normally, and if he had gone a little further, he would have simply fallen. At that moment, he heard another sound. It made him very tense. He didn't even have time to catch his breath. The guy raised his head up and saw a huge trap with wooden pins falling on him from above. He thought, what the hell this is? But it was at that moment that he received a message that the detoxification had been successful and the numbness had disappeared. Since he could fully control his body, he jumped to the side and this trap did not touch him. 100 experience points were received from the beige trap. He jumped to the side and looked at this trap, realizing that a little more and he could have stayed there. Now after he feels his whole body, he will be able to avoid the trap in time. And this meant only one thing. He could now reach the final on time and not be punished. He started moving at speed to reach the final as quickly as possible. After passing one trap, he received 120 experience points for avoiding it. And then jumping over another trap, he received 50 experience points for successfully avoiding such a trap. The guy decided that he needed to give it his all and get to the end as quickly as possible. He understood that if the system gives him the opportunity to get a new level, then in this case he must do it. And moving forward, he passed one trap after another, getting additional points. He decided that if the system gives points for this, then he should use it to move to the next level and become stronger. Passing each test, he received 100 experience points for avoiding traps, and almost at the very end, he received congratulations on upgrading his armor to the royal class. The guy thought that his armor was improved, and he felt like he had strength throughout his body. And he also felt as if every cell of his body was filled with energy, as well as bones, muscles, and even skin. At this moment, he received a notification that a new skill had been acquired, and this skill was Level 1 Infantry-type Skeleton Soldiers, Bing Zhou. This consisted in the fact that it was possible to summon 2 soldiers who would fight for him. The level of the skeleton would increase depending on the level of the owner. Most likely, the guy thought it was a summoning skill, and for this, and for some abilities, he definitely needed armor. Hanshin stood there trying out his new skills, and the same guy who poisoned him was watching him from behind a tree. This guy didn't understand how he was still standing if he hit him with a poison that would kill him, because he should have fallen to the ground and gotten trapped. The guy wondered if the poison he had poisoned him with hadn't worked yet, and he decided to touch him again. He decided that he could do the same as last time, come up unnoticed from behind and put his hand on the shoulder. Well, this time he didn't succeed, because Han Shen noticed his presence and grabbed his hand. The guy said that the same trick doesn't work twice, and he tried to repeat the same thing in vain. The guy raised his opponent's hand as high as possible, and it was visible that there was a specially sharp needle on his ring with which he pricked and poisoned. His opponent tried to say that it seemed like the guy had misunderstood him and wanted to explain everything to him. Han Shen didn't talk to him for long and threw him back with all her strength so that he would understand. At the same time, he said that he had no time for him at all, but he would take the ring with him. This guy started saying that since childhood, he was the one who beat others and no one dared to touch him. This guy pushed back because he couldn't stand for someone being much stronger than him. This guy tried to pounce, screaming about how the newbie was a fucking brat and how dare he behave like that. But the next second, the two guys stretched out their hands, each of them trying to hit with force and destroy their opponent. The guy didn't even understand how this happened because this newbie was able to stop him. Then he realized that this newbie boy was not as weak as it seemed to them at first glance. Han Shen at this moment was thinking how strong his opponent's hand was, that his level was higher than before. His opponent threw him aside and stopped attacking, and he said if he doesn't know anything about it, he's ready to tell him. He turned to the newcomer and said that he was a young master from the Song family and a member of the royal family. And probably the newbie was wrong to underestimate him because he is now ready to show him all his power. Han Shen, after listening to him, thought that he was just an annoying bastard and what did he care about it? But on the other hand, he thought that he would still like to see his skills. His opponent asked what he was muttering, Trey. Then the guy answered him that he was too lazy to fight him, and he could use one of the acquired skills of the Bingzhou skeleton soldier. When these two soldiers were about to enter into battle, Han Shen told his opponent to have fun with them. The guy looked at one and saw that it was a skeleton soldier from Bingzhou infantry. His attack power was D and defense was E. He looked at the second one and saw that he was also a soldier of the infantry, and his strength was also D defense E. The guy didn't want to lose, so he shouted what the hell he had two skeleton soldiers. Han Shen at this moment ordered his soldiers to move forward, and they did not stand still pushing off, but they began to attack their enemy. The soldier who was closer pushed away and approached the enemy, swung and dealt him an attacking blow. The enemy managed to escape this blow at the last moment, but the tree that was near him was cut down. The enemy thought that this was very high speed and strength, and this guy, like most of the students who were equipped with combat armor. While he was thinking and figuring it out, the second soldier approached him and swung his arm to strike. When the guy saw this, he jumped to the side to avoid this blow, otherwise he would have been destroyed. So this guy decided that he needed to use combat armor in this case, because he will have to fight not with one opponent, but with two opponents at once. He was at level 3, his name was Sun Yun, his battle armor was called Poison Sting, and his level was Human King. Sun Yun, as soon as he received the armor, he immediately pushed off to attack the enemy, namely those two skeleton soldiers who were put in place of his opponents. Song Yun was completely confident in his powers, and he believed that the painful poison blade he wielded would never be able to withstand the power of double poisoning. Well, at some point he realized that everything was not going according to his plan, and these two soldiers seemed not to feel his strength. Sun Yun didn't understand what was going on and whether these two were immune to the poison, so he decided to jump back to decide what to do next. At that moment he thought, why was he fighting with these two if he could just kill the one who summoned them? He looked to the side and found no one. The guy didn't understand where his opponent was and how he should act next, but these two soldiers did not retreat from him and continued to fight with him. Han Shen received another notification that he had received 180 experience points for successfully escaping the trap. The guy overcame one trap after another with all his might. He believed that the main thing was to gain more experience and become stronger. And he also thought that he shouldn't waste time on all sorts of trash. At that moment, a table appeared in front of him. The guy stopped. I don't understand what it means to have temporarily generated mandatory quests using teleportation. He looked at his body and realized that something was happening to him. Most likely it was teleportation. The next moment, he was no longer in the place where he stopped. His body had been moved. Where he stood, only one leaf fell from the tree and nothing else reminded of his presence. A few seconds later, the guy was in a completely different place. He landed, and I still don't understand where he is. Opening his eyes, he began to look around, but he was clearly in some kind of closed room. Raising his head up and looking around, he realized that this was most likely a cave, but he still didn't understand what kind of place it was. Seeing the light, he decided that he needed to move in the direction from which the light was coming. The guy decided that he didn't need to think much. He silently went into the light. He needed to complete the next task. When he reached the end of the corridor and went into the next room, he found himself in a place that was incomprehensible to him. That's why the guy thought it was very strange, and why the system transferred him to this particular place. After which, the system gave an alert for him to go down and stop right in the center. When the guy was going down, he had a bad feeling, but the system shouldn't harm him, so he completed the task. After which, he saw a notification that the owner's armor was unavailable, and the body was in a state of detachment. He really couldn't move. From the hole that was in the very corner, he noticed that a centipede was crawling out of there, and another one behind it. Within a few seconds, it seemed like there were hundreds of these creatures on the floor, and they were all approaching him. When the guy saw these creatures, he didn't understand why they were here and why he was here. Then scorpions started crawling out of this hole and they also approached him. This made him a little nervous. After the scorpions, poisonous snakes with fiery eyes began to crawl out trying to attack him. At that moment, a sign appeared in front of him indicating that the insect poison tests had been activated. He was surrounded by poisonous creatures on all sides. Hanshin stood there unable to turn around and poisonous scorpions and snakes were on him and around him. When they stung him with their poisonous sting, the guy felt that it was painful for him. The only thing he didn't understand after each bite was why exactly at that moment he had to go through this test. And why is the system doing this to him since there were countless bites on his body? After each bite, he received a notification that there was danger and the bite was poisoned, and then he received that the body was reaching its limit and the control effect was about to end. Having received such a notification, the guy could not hold back his emotions. He dropped all the forces of his body. At the same time, he felt a wild pain after each bite, and this pain did not go away. The guy fell to the floor. He realized that the poisoning was spreading throughout his body, and every cell inside him was burning with pain. He felt like a sharp knife was tearing at his flesh and blood. Every breath felt like something was tearing his lungs apart. It was an endless pain, as if many needles were sticking into him. It was just a nightmare from which he didn't know when he would wake up. He felt his body shaking with pain. At some point, he even thought that it would probably be easier to die. That's why he decided that he should close his eyes and accept everything as it is. It was at that moment when he closed his eyes that he saw the very world in which he lived. He thought that it looked like someone had died. He heard a man screaming that the coward had broken down, and this guy who found himself below was still breathing. One of the workers told the others not to stand with the pole. They should help call the hospital. So he shouted now because they could still help him. He wasn't dead. Then he saw through his half-opened eyes how the snow was falling on the tops of the trees. Everything was quiet around. And he also saw one of the guys who was holding a shovel in his hands. He said that he was very tired. There were two guys standing up there with shovels in their hands. One of them said, "Did they really think they would take him to the doctor?" After which one of them started to bury this guy, and this man said that this guy is an orphan and he has no family. Zagatova, this guy's still alive, Earth. These people thought that no one would care about his death. And these people thought that if they did this, then no one would worry about him, and then there would be no difference. At that moment, the system showed up and said that antibodies of detoxification were being produced successfully. The guy developed primary resistance to poisons. At that moment, he raised his hand and thought that it was meant to be. He tried to get up on his feet, but he felt that he was very weak like a small ant. But now he decided with the system, he will change and become stronger. Now the guy is tired. It is clear that all this was for the sake of increasing resistance to poisons. At that moment, he concluded that no matter what the system suggested, he would do absolutely everything. The mission was accomplished and he needed to prepare for teleportation. In just a few seconds, he saw before his eyes the very forest in which he was located. He stood on the ground and thought that he had returned back, but now he needed to understand how long he had been delayed. The guy raised his head up, saw the moon, and wondered how long he had been there, because it was already dark. Hearing a rustle behind him, he slowly began to turn his head. He didn't know who was there. The very next moment, he saw that the same guy who was Mrs. Liu's assistant came out from behind the bushes. This guy suddenly started talking about how glad he was to see him. And if everything was okay with him, the guy didn't understand what was going on. The next moment, the guy started shouting for everyone to come to this place. He found it. Hanshin was very surprised. He couldn't even guess why he was doing this. Sometime later, when they returned back to the academy, then he received an explanation. The guy tried to tell that he fainted and woke up only at night. The lady said that it all sounded very strange. Her assistant asked if he was under the influence of some substances. The lady said that in any case, he was lucky that he remained alive. And also the lady asked the guy was dating a student named Sun Yun. Hanshin asked the lady who it was, although he knew what kind of guy it was. After all, it was that same guy with the bangs on his forehead and the arrogant expression on his face. And he was secretly courting Mrs. Liu, and it made her angry. And also the lady's assistant said that he was a very clingy type, and they found his body before they discovered him. Hanshin was very surprised what the body meant and whether he really died. Hanshin said that he did not see him because he underestimated the enemy. He was wounded and did not take part in training for the remaining half day. The lady's assistant said that he did not expect this to happen because, judging by the ladies, there were 2 or more attackers at the scene. The lady also noted that this had never happened before since the academy was founded. The lady ordered her assistant to sort out this situation. She did not understand what had actually happened. At that moment, Hanshin thought that his affairs were bad because he knew the whole truth. The lady told the guy that it was already late and it was time for him to rest, and most importantly, he should gain strength, after which she left. The guy poured himself some hot tea from the teapot that stood on his table, after which he took a few sips and wondered if that guy had died from his skeletons. But he didn't order them to kill. At that moment, he looked at his reflections and thought maybe it was because he hadn't given clear instructions. The only way he could find out what happened there was to call the skeleton soldiers again. A few seconds later, 2 soldiers stood behind him awaiting further orders. The guy took a sip, put the cup on a chair, and asked the skeleton soldiers if they killed that guy in the forest. His subordinates lowered their heads, confirming that they had killed that guy. Then the young man thought that it really meant that these idiots did something that he didn't ask them to do. Hearing that the owner was unhappy with what had happened, they turned their heads and looked at each other. And then they also fell synchronously and began to bow to their master. The guy told them to get up from their knees. And then he calls that from now on they have no right to kill anyone without his order. Then he asked them again. He expressed himself clearly, and they understood what they should do. After which the guy ordered them to go away. He didn't want to see them anymore because these soldiers were strong, but they weren't particularly smart. He decided that he needed to be more careful. The board showed an urgent mission to complete the search task and follow the directions to his target. This task must be completed immediately. The guy thought that this task appeared very quickly, and at that moment he needed to follow the line that was on the field. He walked up to the door, put his 2 hands in and opened the door. He needed to get out of the room. Then he continued along this line and realized that this line was already leading to the street. He thought that this time the system had prepared for him. It was clear that the system had prepared another test for him, but he didn't know yet what it would be like this time. As he walked along the line, he passed several houses, but she continued to lead him further. Walking along this line, he entered a huge building where there were many chests. Near one of these chests, the line ended and the guy remained standing in this place. He reached his destination. This whole trail led to this place. Did he really need to get there through the hatch? The place is very strange, far from the academy. And the strangest thing is that there was no one there. He turned his head and was surprised. After he completed and arrived at the end point, he received 1,000 experience points. Turning his head, he saw a corpse. The guy thought it was by chance not the same one of his classmates. He came closer and removed the blanket that was covering his face. He wanted to make sure who this person was. When he lifted the cover, he thought that there was only one corpse in this room, and it was the same guy that his skeleton soldiers killed. What was his surprise that it really was him, but he couldn't do anything about it. Then he covered it again. At this point, the system said that he had already received the air soldier ticket reward and a new armor skill. The guy turned his head and saw an air soldier skeleton. He didn't understand why the system gave him a soldier without armor. A separate system notified him that combat armor had been detected that could be extracted, and he had to make his choice. At that moment, the guy thought that if so, then he was ready and would use the extraction skill. He decided to use another skill that he received thanks to the system, and this skill is armor extraction. Dima informed him that the extraction was in progress, and everything that concerned this guy had to be extracted. A few seconds later, the system notified that the skill had been successfully applied and that his summoned skeleton had new armor. The armor extraction was complete. He only needed to name the new soldier who was under his command. The guy thought he would return to the name later. He was interested in how many soldiers he could call upon. When he clicked on the search bar, the system showed that he had 100,000 infantry soldiers under his command, and he could assemble an army from them. On the second day, when morning came, everyone gathered in one place to discuss the incident. After this incident on the training ground, the students were horrified. The academy increased its security quite quickly. The boy did not complain because his adopted parents visited him very often with the permission of the academy. Sometimes they treated him too kindly. For a moment he thought why he didn't call them mom and dad, but these people didn't seem to be offended by him. Training at the academy continued as usual, and all students gathered for training every morning. After everything that happened, the boy was on the same level with his classmates, and it was decided to keep the story of the skeleton soldiers a secret. Since he understood that he couldn't rely on summoned skeletons alone, he needed to continue working on improving his armor. During training, he easily dealt with traps and even bypassed the most difficult ones on the training ground. Well, despite this, he never got more experience. Training again with new comrades significantly improved his skills. But despite this, he was still unable to use his armor, which he owned from the very beginning. Time passed very quickly, and they got to know each other better, and most importantly, who is capable of what. His classmates told him that some people from noble families come to study at the academy, and some are looking for potential. and someone is trying to establish connections with a teacher of the Academy of the Divine level. But all this is just for fun to find out that he will never end up on the battlefield. 3 months later, the first 5-day vacation was over and everyone was happy that they could go home, and his new girlfriend asked him where he was going to go. Han Shen answered her that he had not yet decided, because in this world he was like a stranger and did not know where he should go. Then the girl said, why doesn't he visit her as her mother makes delicious buns and he should try them? The couple thought it was inconvenient. Unexpectedly for the student, the librarian interrupted their conversation and said that someone had come to see the guy, they say, on some important matter. Han Shen was very surprised that they came to him, and he was also surprised that the librarian crawled out of the bushes. After that, the guy went to a city that was very close to the academy. He was riding on that very cart, and the coachman told the young gentleman that they were already at the place near one of the houses. When the guy got off the cart, he stood near this house and began to examine it. He caught himself thinking that he was here for the first time, but everything seemed familiar to him. And also raising his head up, he saw a sign on which his last name was written. He was also very surprised by this. He didn't wait long at the threshold and decided that he should go inside. Approaching the doors, he opened them slightly. A bright light was shining from inside. When he went inside, he saw those same new-named parents of his. The woman rushed at him. She was happy to see her boy. The guy unexpectedly came back from her very quickly, and this woman fell right on her face. The man who was her husband got very angry at the guys and said that he was a bastard, and how could he avoid his mother's hugs. As always, the woman started screaming, how dare he hit her son, and at that moment she punched her husband. The only one who was completely calm was his mother's cousin who worked as a housewife. The girl told them not to quarrel but rather to come to the table. His new mother told the guy to look at how much delicious food she had prepared for him, and he was glad that he was really being greeted like that. Immediately after such a meeting, silence fell in the house. No one accused anyone of anything. His name mother told him to sit down, don't be shy, because it was his house. At least that's what she thought. The guy asked where the aunt was and why they weren't together at the back table. Then his father told him not to worry, and that she would be there soon. Also, the father said that his mother is busy since the morning, and she prepares new dishes for him. The boy happily answered his adopted father, but he didn't know what else to talk to him about. I also didn't know what to talk about with the guy, and his new name was Father. They sat in silence. The guy wondered if communication between a son and a father had always been so awkward, after which the man ordered the servant who was in that room to leave it. And after the servants left, he came up and closed the door tightly so that no one could hear their conversation. After that, the man fell to his knees right in front of the guy and lowered his head down. All this was very unexpected for the guy himself. He did not understand what was happening and why he was behaving like this. The guy looked at him and told him to get up immediately. He doesn't understand what he's doing. Then his new adopted father, with his head down, asked that he be heard and called him a sacred child because he knew that he was different from those like them. He said that he was asking for only one favor. The guy didn't understand what was going on, but decided that he needed to listen. Then his name began to say that after the death of their child, his wife suffered for several years, and a smile never appeared on her face. Such a joyful smile, he sees her for the first time, and all thanks to him. The man, without raising his head, asked the guy to call her mom here because it would be very important for her. He thought that these words could make her simply happy, and it would not cost him anything, the guy thought. His aunt told his mother to let the servants do their work, to which she replied that her son was home for the first time and she had to do everything herself. Auntie said that she sees her sister so happy with such a bright smile on her face for the first time, to which the woman replied that it was all thanks to her son, because it was he who made her happy. But this happiness did not last long. The woman felt that someone was approaching from behind, and this someone was very close. He jumped down from above and landed right next to two women. They wanted to know who he was. It was a warrior, but it is not clear why he was in this place at such a happy moment and interfered with them. There was a loud thunder, a loud voice of a servant who was screaming and calling for help. Something irreparable had happened. One of the maids reported to the master that her sister's mistress had been kidnapped by people in armor. The gentleman was surprised and did not understand what to do. He believed that peace and tranquility always reigned in their city, and it was strange to him how this could happen. Han Shen came up behind him, hugged him, and addressed him as his father, to which his father said that it was his fault that he didn't even care about security. After which his father said that they needed to immediately inform the authorities so that they could take care of the kidnappers. Then his father said that they wouldn't do that in case the kidnappers harmed the hostages. His son hit him in the face and told him not to say such stupid things. His father stood and cried, "I don't understand where to look for them." But at some point he remembered that his adopted son also had armor. When the gentleman turned around, he did not see the guy in front of him. He asked where the young gentleman was. The servant said that he was just here. The guy wasn't going to give up just like that, so he wanted to help his new family because they treated him well. He made one jump after another in different directions, trying to find the person who kidnapped his mother and her sister. Moving forward, the guy thought only about the fact that at the academy they were taught how to track the aura. Well, when he rose up and began to track the aura, he realized that the kidnapper was far away, and he could hardly feel him. He decided that he needed to focus on the aura of his sister's mistress, and his senses led him to the nearby forest. It seemed that in this place nature was in its original form, and in this place there was complete harmony. When the young man landed in the very place where the deer had just been walking, the guy felt that the lady's energy was becoming weaker and weaker, but she was somewhere very close. He looked to the side and realized that the lady and her sister were in the very cave in front of the entrance to which he stood. He only had to figure out who needed to kidnap an old woman in the middle of the day, because the place was quite far from the city. And also, it was very dark there, and for sure someone could have set up an ambush. Maybe there was a trap inside, but he couldn't hesitate. Taking his first steps into the cave, he saw that it was very dark inside and he could hardly see anything. He began to move further. Only the glowing mushrooms showed him the way into the depths of this cave. He had to be on guard because one of the warriors would attack the man, and there was most likely a trap somewhere very close to him. Well, when the guy went to the very depths, he saw the lady sitting there. He was happy and approached her. Then he came closer and saw that she was still breathing. Well, it seemed like she was unconscious. He asked her if she could hear him. At that moment, he heard someone's very heavy, wild sounds that were very close. Turning his head, he saw a huge boar with fangs and burning eyes. At that moment, when he looked straight into the eyes of this boar, a table appeared in front of him saying that this was a danger and he was going to the territory of the spiritual beast of the beast. He had to prepare himself for being eaten now, but the guy thought that he could still take this beast away from the lady. So without thinking twice, he made several jumps back to the exit to take this beast with him. At that moment, he summoned the weapon he had according to his level and rank. He made another jump and tried to hit the beast, but the blow was useless. The guy thought that this beast was at least 2 levels higher than him, and it would be difficult for him to cope with it. He also saw that this beast had rage, and the beast's attack power was doubled. The defense was reduced by half. Then the guy thought that he needed to return to the lady, because he could suffer at this rate. He took it and put it on his shoulder and began to very quickly leave this cave. He decided that he would not let anyone hurt the lady. When he almost left this cave, he saw in front of him the mistress's sister who was standing at the exit. The guy thought that in front of him was the same housekeeper and the mistress's sister, and he almost forgot about her. But for some reason he couldn't understand how she was able to escape and why she was standing conscious outside the cave. The next moment the guy understood everything because behind the housekeeper stood the same warrior who had committed the kidnapping. The guy understood that they wouldn't let him leave this cave so easily, and he needed to come up with something. When the housekeeper saw the guy, she laughed and told him to try to get around her. The warrior who stood behind the housekeeper hugged her and hit her on the ground with all his might. The ground in the entrance to the cave began to collapse and stones began to fall from top to bottom. Now the guy knew for sure that they were on the same page and they could laugh as much as their hearts desired. After all, the more his laughter will creep in now, the more terrible his death will be. The weapon that was in the guy's hand was destroyed and shattered into small pieces. Han Shen lowered the lady to the ground and sat her down. He wanted her not to get hurt in any case. Since the passage to the cave was closed and on the other side, the huge wild beast that lived in this cave was approaching. The guy told the lady not to be afraid. He would be there, and they would soon return home, but for now she needed to rest. The boar was not going to stay away. He decided to attack the guy. For this, he headed towards him. Having pushed off and jumped up, the boar was almost at the target. He could have crushed the guy just a little more. At this moment, Han Shen said that he would not be able to handle 2 points, so he needed to call on assistance. After his summoning, 2 skeleton soldiers entered into battle with this huge monster trying to stop him. And the guy also summoned an airborne skeleton soldier who attacked him from the other side. The monster looked around and was a little confused, as he now needed to attack not one but several. And his goal was far away, and this monster could not reach his goal because he was stopped by soldiers with a skeleton. When the monster was stopped, the guy ordered his skeleton soldiers to finish off someone from the outside. They need to get out and act quickly before the enemies leave. He ordered them to be destroyed. His army, that he called exactly the same way, directed towards the exit of this cave. The warrior and the mistress's sister thought that they shouldn't wait and not be too careful, because a first-year student is unable to defeat a spiritual beast alone. The lady's sister thought that even if that was the case, it would be better for them to wait. She'd been planning this for several months and no mistake should happen. The warrior thought that it was a waste of time. Everything could have been solved back then in the backyard, but the mistress's sister thought that it was better to pretend that what happened was an accident. Then no one would guess. After her husband's death, she worked as a housekeeper for her sister's family for 8 years, and they had no heirs, so all the property should have gone to her. But then out of nowhere they had a son, and she overheard her sister discussing the inheritance they were going to leave to a brat. She felt sorry, but she had no other choice. The warrior said that he doesn't care about their family quarrels, but she just needs to make sure that no one finds out about it, and he is taking a huge risk. Unexpectedly for these two kidnappers, the stones that blocked the entrance to the cave began to move. I turned my head in surprise and didn't understand what was going on and whether this guy could have gotten out on his own. It was visible how the stones at the entrance were becoming smaller and smaller, and very bright light was shining through them. He didn't understand whether this bastard was still alive. He couldn't even imagine it. But the very next moment, the stones were thrown with great force from the entrance to the cave to the side. The warrior barely managed to dodge one of these stones from hitting him directly. He was perplexed. The warrior was furious. He didn't understand what kind of bastard he was and where he got so much strength from. He shouted at him to come out. If not, he was a coward and fight him. At that moment, the warrior saw the head of that very monster. Then the warrior said, "Is it really not enough for him 2 people?" And this monster came out to fight with him. The warrior was ready to engage in no slaughter. But what was the surprise of the mistress's sister? And when the huge head of the monster fell right in front of them, and behind this head they saw the very guy they were going to destroy in this cave. They didn't understand how this could be and why he hadn't died yet, because he wasn't that strong. He said although it was surprising, he shouldn't be happy about his salvation, and now that they were alone. At that moment he was interrupted by what he saw. He could no longer say anything. He was only surprised. After all, behind the back of that very bastard, as he called him, stood a whole army of skeleton soldiers that he summoned. He didn't understand what the hell this was, because he was alone in the cave, and these were his summoned skeletons. Vaughn thought that they were low level and they shouldn't be feared. He could deal with them with ease. Turning his head, he saw another skeleton, and he looked more powerful than the others, but he was still not his level. He was a brat. The warrior told the guy to pray because it was his last day in life. At least that's what he thought. Han Shen took advantage of his abilities and changed the equipment he was wearing. He summoned the main equipment. He wanted to try it out in battle as soon as possible. The warrior who stood opposite shouted to the guy to come, and he would tear each of them apart. He was a professional killer, and his armor level was class 5. The guy had a new task, and it was a mission to destroy a hired killer. He definitely accepted this mission because he thought that only now would the fun begin. The next thing Han Shen did was order his skeleton soldiers to enter the battle and kill the enemy. From several sides, skeleton soldiers began to attack the hired killer, striking him one blow after another. After the assassin put up his shield and one of the skeleton soldiers was damaged, a warning was issued and the skeleton soldier received critical damage. After the first such blow, the hired killer dealt several more blows to the soldiers with a skeleton, and another warning followed that the soldier had received critical damage. The hired killer stood there rejoicing that everything worked out for him. It was expected for him, and these two were nothing. But the next moment, the hired killer felt a blow from behind. He was ready for it. He thought that the blow from behind was a bit unexpected for him, and this soldier was afraid to fight face to face. Well, the hired killer understood that this wreck who tried to attack him had the skill of poisoning. But even despite this, I understood that he would be able to grind him into dust before I acted. The system gave a hint that he could call upon the soldier's summers, and several times. That's why Han Shen decided to make another call. He needed to stop the hired killer at any cost. After the call, several more soldier skeletons appeared who could join the battle. The hired killer, when he saw that new skeleton soldiers had appeared, he was very surprised and didn't understand what was going on. He wanted to know where so many of them came from, but he decided that he could still kill them all and activated his combat power. The guy raised 2 of his fingers up and told him that he didn't give a damn how strong he was, after which he was in his armor because he believed that the hired killer could not even compare with him. The hired killer was furious, considering this guy himself an on-him brat, and that he would be able to quickly deal with him. Well, at that moment, he barely managed to repel one sudden attack from the skeleton soldier. Apparently things didn't go according to plan, and the assassin could barely hold off one attack after another. The mistress's sister, watching everything that was happening from the side, did not understand why her plan was perfect and how it happened. She couldn't even imagine that this guy would have so much strength, so she decided to run away before it was too late. Then she decided that she would stay and beat if she ran away. She would lose absolutely all her wealth. She still had hope. After all, she put everything she had into it, and she had no way back either. At that moment, the guy started attacking. Han Shen pushed off the ground, concentrated. He needed to deliver the final blow. The assassin at this point decided that he should take advantage of his opportunity and put up a barrier. The guy was well aware that the poison had already taken effect and his opponent had no strength left. Therefore, he thought that his opponent should not pretend, and at that moment Han Shen was struck by a hired killer and thought that this was incredible. After all, he broke his weapon in one blow, and because of this poison he can't move normally. The assassin felt skeleton soldiers grab his arm from one side, and also one of these soldiers that the guy called grabbed him by the helmet on his head. The hired killer was completely exhausted and he couldn't resist, but he was still angry. So he started screaming that this guy is a son of a bitch and he doesn't know who he raised his hand against. He tried to convey that he was the leader of a group of mercenaries, and if he killed him, then all the other mercenaries would not leave it like that. The hired killer shouted for him to let go, and then he would think about mercy. He warned the guy about the consequences. But then, as if he had not heard what his opponent was saying, he swung with all his might in order to deliver his final blow. The hired killer didn't even have time to understand what happened before his head flew off to the side. Already at the last moment, the hired killer understood that this should not have happened, and this guy very easily cut off his head. He did all this without a single word. All he needed was one precise swing and the young killer's head was cut off. The hired killer realized at the last moment that this guy was clearly not as simple as one might think. And he was not just a man who could cope with these were the last thoughts of the hired killer. The mission was completed, the level increase was achieved, the armor improvements, and the guy got the third level. He became stronger. Believe me, I was not happy with what happened. He turned his head and saw 3 more new soldiers. He also received 2 more awards of 1 skeleton soldier and 1 more magical skeleton. The system gave him a notification that a new extraction of Human King Level 5 armor had been detected. He needed to make a choice. Of course, he didn't doubt for a second that he should agree to the extraction of the armor. He had to wait for a while as the extraction was in progress. And the very next moment, the system gave a notification that the armor was being put on his skeleton soldier. For some time, the armor was put on his new skeleton soldier, who he received an award for. The system then announced that the armor extraction was complete, and he had to name his soldier. The guy thought he had to give a name again. He decided he would deal with it later. After training every day, he always carefully studied the books that Grandpa Jiang gave him, and he found out that there are 4 great military ranks. Stormbringer is the first soldier who climbs the enemy's walls. This is a military rank requiring exceptional speed and skill. He has the greatest agility and the fastest speed, which is why he gave one of the skeletons such a name. A frontbreaker is a soldier who breaks into enemy positions and destroys their defenses. He needs courage and fortitude. He needed all these qualities to survive and fight surrounded by the enemy, which is why he gave the second one such a name. There was also a general killer, a soldier who killed or captured an enemy general on the battlefield. This required exceptional physical strength and could have a decisive influence on the outcome of the battle. A flag capturer is a soldier who captured an enemy flag under protection. Such a soldier must have a perfect balance of strength and speed, since the flag is of great importance to the army. The guy thought that he needed to leave these last 2 titles for now, and he would use them next time. He ordered to protect the lady. When the sister, the lady, heard there, she thought that everything was over. Everything had gone to waste, both the inheritance and her wonderful plan. The only thing that came to her mind at that moment was that she needed to run away urgently while she was alive and she would still have a chance to return the wealth. The mistress's sister took a few steps forward and felt a sharp sword suddenly near her throat. She had no choice but to stop because one of the skeleton soldiers stopped her. After he stopped her, he suddenly pushed her forward and slapped her on the back of the head with his foot. The lady's sister fell to the ground, raising her head. She understood that this was the end. She began to ask the young gentleman who stood in front of her, because he was her nephew. The woman tried to soften his heart, even shedding a tear, saying that the mercenary was to blame for everything. He forced her. If she hadn't done as he said, she could have died, because he threatened to kill her. The guy wondered if she really thought he was that stupid and thought she could talk his ear off. The woman knelt before him and said that she would never dare to do that again. He had to believe her, and she was ready to repay the debt to his family. At that moment, the guy seemed not to hear her at all. He did not show any emotions on his face. The woman didn't understand why this bastard standing in front of her was silent. She needed to come up with something. So she started saying that she knew what she did was unforgivable, but she had no other choice. He should just let her go, and she would never come close to the family again. The guy answered her that from what she said only one sentence, her actions were really unforgivable. At that moment, the guy thought that this woman had been in the family for many years, so he didn't know if she had any other comrades in the family. At that moment, one of the skeleton soldiers suddenly attacked the lady's sister and dealt her a fatal blow. The cloud woman fell to the ground and released her spirit. Han Shen looked at his soldier and didn't understand what happened. He started swearing what kind of things were these, and why did he do this because he hadn't finished speaking at all. And the most important thing was that it was unclear why his soldier couldn't hear him at all and where he went. The soldier suddenly turned in his direction, and I showed him what he had drawn. Because at one point the guy said that she had acted unforgivably, and he heard it. Han Shen actually said that, but that didn't justify him at all since he didn't give any direct instructions. But what upset the guy the most was that his soldier had drawn him so terribly, and that was why he had gotten kicked. The guy thought that this was not what he meant. The main problem was that they still could not fully understand his orders. And he'll need to train them properly later, or else these brainless idiots will ruin all his plans. The guy carried the lady on his shoulders and she still hasn't woken up. But thanks to the treatment of the skeleton, her pulse has become stable. Now that she was out of danger, they should hurry back so that no one would worry anymore. The lady opened her eyes and asked her son where they were. He answered her as a mother. Does she really not remember how she was kidnapped? The lady dared to remember what had happened to her over the past few hours, but she remembered nothing. The only thing she heard was that the guy called her mom. She asked him again what he called her. Then he repeated, "Doesn't she like it if he calls her mom?" She asked him to call her that again. She told him to let her go and she could walk on her own, but the guy replied that it wasn't hard for him to carry her. After some time, the servants ran to tell the master that his wife and the young master had returned. When the gentleman heard this news, he was very happy, thinking that it was true, and rushed to his wife. When he saw his wife, he began to say that, thank the gods, she was safe, but the lady noticed that she was very hungry. The gentleman was very upset. He said that he would cook her food. He wanted to know if she was okay and if nothing hurt. Suddenly, a stranger intervened in the conversation. It was Zichiyan. He said that he did not expect everything to be resolved so quickly. It seems that the young master is doing well at the academy. The boy asked his father who it was, and what did he answer? He thought that if he couldn't defeat the criminals, Leon and his mother would be in danger. Help from the authorities wouldn't hurt. This man was the sheriff of this city, and he wanted to ask the guy where the housekeeper was. Han Shun answered that it was a long spring story. Siri walked up to the guy, looked him straight in the eyes, and he thought the guy was a little arrogant. So the sheriff asked the young gentleman to discuss the matter later. The only thing that interested him right now was what kind of dirty creatures were investigating him. The guy pretended to be very surprised and said that he didn't understand what he was talking about because he was definitely not a psychic. Well, if he really wasn't a psychic, then it's unclear what he was talking about. At that moment, the sheriff raised his one hand and got into a fighting pose. He told the guy to come out himself or to make him do it. When Han saw the sheriff like that, he thought he had a very strong aura. The aura was so strong that the guy decided that he should leave this place. Well, unexpectedly for him, he felt that someone was stopping him. He had no choice but to look who it was. The guy stopped and turned his head and was very surprised by what he saw. In front of him stood a second-year teacher from the Eastern Academy who told him how rude it sounded because he could now even feel his aura. Siri said that he was very surprised that it was him because he felt some energy fluctuations, and if he had been in armor and used stealth skills, he would not have noticed it. The teacher said that they probably already heard about the recent incident at the academy where a student was attacked, and he had to secretly protect this guy. The sheriff wanted to clarify whether he attacked someone or him. Han Shen was even more surprised when he found out that this teacher Tan had been following him since the beginning of the holidays. Jia Yuan-jin replied that he now knew all his secrets and winked at him with one eye. The guy realized that there was no point in hiding the skeletons. Now, he had definitely seen everything that had happened to him. I asked the teacher if he had already recovered from the injury he received the last time he used invisibility to spy on Liu. The teacher started telling his brother to have at least a little respect and not say all this in front of the student. At that moment, someone called the sheriff. The sheriff stepped aside and started talking to someone. The guy didn't understand what he was doing. Then the teacher said that he was most likely communicating with his colleague. The guy thought that it was some kind of skill. But the teacher answered him that he had a device for communication through an earphone. This is a masterpiece from the equipment department of the academy, a magical instrument for remote communication. You only need to press once to answer, and if you press again, then the conversation will be interrupted. And if you want to call, you just need to think about it in your mind. She toads twice. You can reject all calls. When the guy heard this explanation, he thought that this earphone was very similar to Bluetooth headphones. The sheriff at that moment said that a monstrous creature had been discovered 100 miles from this place, and he didn't have enough people, and he had to go. The teacher told his brother Ju that he would like to take the young master with him, and asked for permission to do so. The sheriff said that he agreed. The guy was very surprised because he saw that the sheriff could still fly. The teacher at the academy told him not to be surprised because this is a skill that awakens at the stage of the Dragon King. He only needed to learn to try and he too could, after which the teacher took the guy's hand into the hall and said that it was time for them to go, after which the two of them took off like that. The teacher said that he would help him only 100 miles. They would be able to get there in a couple of moments. The guy thought that in the books he read there was not a word about this, and his level was still too low for such knowledge. It seems there is a lot in this world that he still doesn't understand. He needed to go back and ask his grandfather, the librarian, to give him even more books. Exactly 2 moments passed since they began to land. They arrived at the place. The guy noticed that there were a lot of ships washed up on the shore. The teacher said that it looked like it was the work of an animal. The sheriff said that there used to be several fishing villages around this lake. They say that all the inhabitants were killed, and the creature is probably hiding in the water. Everything that was said was very surprising for the guy. He lowered his head down and was even more surprised. Since he noticed someone's path, it means there was someone else in the water and it was a human hand. Now it was only necessary to understand that most likely it was a severed limb. There were human remains and animals in the lake. Having seen everything that was in the lake, the guy made the assumption that most likely it was some kind of creature. The sheriff said that this is the nature of monsters. They kill everyone except their own kind. When the guy saw all this, he thought that these monsters, in other words, were worse than any animal. The sheriff said that he is not strong in water fights, and his brother's armor does not have certain attributes. It is not clear how they can lure this creature out. Well, despite this, he said that he had an idea, although he didn't know how to tell about it. But this idea was very bad, and most likely it could have led to nothing. The idea came to him when he saw a wooden trough floating on the waves. Siri decided that it would be easiest for them to use a person they could protect as foam. It was really worth it. They put a guy in this wooden barrel and let him swim in this lake. The teacher at the academy said that the devilish creatures that are in this lake will still have to be encountered by the guy sooner or later. Han Shen at this moment thought that he was really unprotected, and he knew that his soldiers would not be able to help him either. The guy felt the waves around his barrel getting stronger and stronger. He rose up and looked into the water. When he lowered his head, he immediately realized that he was the very same monster who had done all this here. The mouth of this monster was so huge that the guy sitting in the barrel fell inside and into this paste. The guy had no choice but to jump up in order to attack this monster. As soon as he was able to jump back, this monster immediately slammed the very barrel he was in. At that moment, the guy thought, why are these two standing there, not even rushing to help him? Most likely they want him to cope on his own. Then the guy thought, if they want this, then they leave him no choice. He called on the system to arm him. He thought that it was even better for him. Now he can see how much he has improved his skills. At the same time, he went on the attack to strike the monster that was ready to swallow him just a few seconds ago. Having landed on the monster from above, the guy struck him with all his might, trying to do it with as much force as possible. This blow was really strong and the monster started making loud sounds. Han barely managed to stay on his back. He held onto his weapon with all his might to keep from falling into the water. The guy thought that he had really become much stronger, but not yet enough to cope with a monster like this. The only correct decision that came to his mind was that he needed to push off, and it was better for him to fight on the ground. Having landed on the ground, he was in much more favorable conditions than just a few minutes ago. The guy reached out his hand to get back his weapon that he had, but it was in the monster's body. He had to exert a fair amount of force to get his weapon back. And in just a few seconds, his weapon was in his hands. Now he could fully enter the battle first. The guy stood and thought that, judging by the aura, this monster is not of a very high level, but he is still quite strong. The sheriff and the teacher were watching what was happening in this lake with the shore. The sheriff said that this monster has the same strength as a 6th-level king. He doubted that this guy would be able to handle the monster. So he dressed to help the guy. If there was a need for it, the water in the lake began to rise. The monster that was in the water a few minutes ago jumped out onto the land after the guy. The sheriff thought that if they continued to stand on the shore and watch, this guy could die. The teacher at the academy said that he should just trust him. This guy is not that simple. At that moment, when the monster jumped out of this lake, Han closed his eyes and made a call. As in the previous time, several skeleton soldiers came to his defense, and in addition to them, those who had their own armor. The sheriff was very surprised at this moment, as he could not even imagine that such a first-year student could have his own army. The skeleton soldiers attacked the monster from all sides, striking him one blow after another. In this way, they wanted to inflict as much damage as possible. And the airborne soldier's flight dealt him a double blow with poisonous swords from above. The monster tried to escape from these attacks by catching at least one skeleton soldier and destroying it. But only this monster caused damage, as the soldier's summer doctor immediately restored the skeleton soldiers. This was one of his new skills, and his new soldier was a skeleton that could restore others. The sheriff turned to the teacher and asked him if he had seen that even powerful warriors could only summon two, but this guy was much more. The academy teacher replied that he was also surprised when he first saw all this. And most importantly, he was surprised that this guy still had a low level of combat armor. At that moment, the monster assessed the entire situation he was in and what he should do next. He decided that his target would be the very skeleton soldier who restores everyone else. The guy thought that this monster was smarter than he even thought. It immediately targeted the doctor. He needed to protect him. So the guy stood in front of the healers and fought off this attack. He couldn't allow the two healers to be destroyed. Han decided that he also needed to intervene and evaluate the powers he had gained recently. He extended his hand to stop this monster and not let it go further. When he succeeded, he turned and told his soldiers to continue treating because he was responsible for their safety. Two soldiers' doctors remained standing in the same place. They watched in order to help everyone else. But when they heard such words from their master, they felt very pleased, as if blood had flowed to their faces. They started shouting that their master was the best and they would follow their master. It was just a cry of joy that came from the soldiers behind and from the gentleman. The guy, despite all these shouts, ordered his soldiers to concentrate on their work. He also ordered two more to attack the monster's weak spots, and they had to do it as quickly as possible. He then ordered the skeleton air soldier to attack the monster from behind. The sheriff, when he was watching everything that was happening on the other side, asked the teacher if this guy was definitely a first-year academy student. The teacher asked the sheriff what he thought about this guy, because in the future he will definitely become an excellent warrior. Or maybe he is a good leader who is able to lead. Even at this moment, he is doing it very well. It is not clear who he is. The lake, which until recently was so calm, and it seemed that nothing was happening in it. At that moment, everything was completely different. One of the skeleton soldiers cut off the monster's tail. At the same moment, another soldier came up from the opposite side and cut off another part of this monster. Now all that was left for Han to do was what he had to do, destroy this monster, so he swung his arm to strike. And after he swung, he struck and cut this monster into two pieces. The sheriff was very surprised because this guy managed to kill the monster without much effort. It was incredible. Han received a notification that he received 1,000 experience points and an additional reward treasure chest conditions. He can open the chest after reaching level 5. At that moment, the guy thought that the system most likely knew how to satisfy his appetites. But still, at that moment, he felt how power filled his entire body and he changed. Right before his eyes, the very monster he had cut into two seemed to be incinerating. The guy watched everything that was happening and was even more surprised when only 2 crystals remained in the place of this monster. He did not understand what it was. "Come closer," he extended his hand. He thought that it looked most like a crystal. It was a little strange for him, but when he took one of these crystals in his hand, he felt that they carried some kind of internal energy. The sheriff and the academy teachers landed near the guy. The sheriff said it was a battle crystal. And then he added that after the death of the monster, it turns into stone, an excellent material for enchanting armor. The academy teacher turned to his brother because he was a famous weapon sorcerer and had to show how enchantment works. The teacher said that he doesn't know about it yet because he is studying it in his 2nd year of study, and not everyone can master enchantments. The sheriff then said that last time his brother didn't pay him for upgrading the weapon spell, to which he replied that he would pay for everything this month. The sheriff came up to the guy and told him to give him his weapon and the crystal. He would show him everything now. The sheriff explained to the guy that a sorcerer can only enchant one piece of armor, and in this case a weapon. The guy, watching everything that was happening, thought about what kind of strong energy fluctuations occur when the stone and the weapon merge. Indeed, After a few seconds, the sheriff made it so that the stone that remained from the monster and the weapon merged into one. And then the stone disappeared, leaving behind only light for a few more seconds. After which the sheriff threw the guy a weapon and said that the crystal could only increase the strength of his weapon. When the guy caught him, he immediately felt that he became heavier and something had clearly changed. The weapon was enchanted for strength. At that moment, the guy thought that it would be good for him to enchant the rest of the armor. It was as if the sheriff had read his thoughts and said that with stones of a higher class, you can enchant different attributes. They can be bought, but they are expensive. He also said that you can ask friends or family for money. The guy didn't have any money, but his family did. After Han returned to his family home, he immediately went to his new parents. The first thing he did was ask them for money. The gentleman asked why he needed so much money. They were a little tense. Their son asked them to just let him explain everything, and he made a very sweet face. The lady intervened in their conversation. As a mother, she could not remain on the sidelines and shouted that he needed to be given this money. The gentleman could not resist his wife's argument. He took out the money and told his son not to spend it all at once. The boy thanked his father. When the lady approached her son, she said that she would not ask why he needed such a sum, but he had to promise one thing. She asked him not to do anything bad because she wanted her son to be the best. Then the boy turned to his mother and said that he just wanted to buy some spiritual stones to improve his armor and get better at dealing with monsters. The gentleman, when he heard from whom, he said that he thought this money was needed for something serious because their family is engaged in the trade of spiritual stones and he does not understand why to spend money. Han was then very surprised whether this was true, but his new father said that they were not only dealing with stones but also managing banks and mines. The guy then immediately handed the money back and said that in that case, the money would be returned to the family, to which the father told him that he had taken it, but he would still need it. A couple of days later, the holidays were over and it was time to return to the eastern part of the academy. Han walked up the steps of the academy. He couldn't be late because the holidays were already over. He had a huge bag on his shoulders. He was only going to take a few spiritual stones, but his mother ended up packing extra clothes, fruit, snacks, and more. He walked and thought that it was heavy, and he was dragging all this to the academy so that he could use it later. Wandering much further, he saw that somewhere in the distance a guy was sitting next to me. Suddenly he thought that he needed to stop that guy who was sitting near the stone. What was he doing there? Han stopped and looked in the direction where he saw this guy and didn't find anyone there anymore. He thought he was imagining things. But this guy was behind him. He touched his bag and asked if it was really hard for him to carry this luggage. And also this guy asked Han, most likely he needs help, to which Han thought this guy is some kind of strange. There was clearly something wrong with him, and Han at that moment thought that maybe he was also not from this world. Well, unexpectedly for himself, he found out that this guy from his stories was from a Western academy. Guy asked Han what he's surprised about. Hasn't he heard before that besides the Eastern one there is also a Western academy? Han asked him again because he was curious. In the Western academy they also train armored warriors, to which the guy replied that yes, their academy is located in the west of the continent of the Battlelands, quite far from this place. Usually they really rarely intersect. They also have 3 courses like the Eastern Academy and powerful armored warriors teach. It's just not clear why you ordered the first-year students to gather at the Eastern Academy last year. This guy said that he could put a huge bag of Han, his spatial backpack, and when they climbed the mountain he would give Han didn't know there was a spatial backpack. Then the guy said that this is spatial magic. You can put any object there that will rise by itself, but you can't do it alive. After which his new acquaintance extended his hand to hide this huge bag in his spatial backpack. The guy watched everything that was happening and watched as his huge bag was pulled straight into his palm. Han saw this for the first time, so it surprised him a lot. This guy started telling that the backpack is a skill that awakens automatically after reaching the level of the human king of the 5th stage and allows you to carry a lot of things very conveniently. At that moment, Han thought that he only had 2 levels left and he could also try this skill. When they were climbing up, Han asked his new friend why he was sleeping near the rocks, to which he replied that he had been playing poker all night and was terribly tired, so he reached this place and rested. After a while, they were already at the top and needed to go to the training ground. This time, not only first-year students from the Eastern, but also the Western part were on the training ground. Mrs. Liu turned to them and said that they had already noticed that this day was not quite ordinary. She also added that their academy is accepting new guests and looked at the guys from the Western part. Namely, the students and the Western Academy seemed to be about their level. Han looked at these guys, and at that moment he thought that he was very interested in what kind of armor they had. He saw 2 people standing behind Mrs. Liu. He thought they must be teachers from the Western Academy. The woman's name was Elir, and she was a first-year teacher at the Western Academy. The same hidden energy emanated from her body as from Mrs. Liu. The guy noticed that for some reason, there was no energy fluctuation at all from the old man standing next to him. He knew that the highest-ranking masters of the God-King level could completely hide their energy and aura. He had an impassive face. He was motionless as a mountain. Was he really the strongest among the strong? But suddenly the young man noticed that this same old man of whom he had such a good opinion was just standing there snoring. He was sleeping. The librarian approached the old man and extended his hand to catch him sleeping. The librarian said that he was caught. He was sleeping again. Most likely he had been playing cards all night yesterday, to which the old man replied that there was no such thing. The librarian told him that it was, and then he responded that it was not. Mrs. Liu told the respected elders that they should have a conscience and not act like children in front of the students. The librarian replied that they were not old friends who had not seen each other for 100 years, and what would happen if they fooled around a little. Mrs. Liu replied to Elder Jiang to start announcing as soon as possible to see the children are already waiting. He hurried. The elder approached according to the rule of his glasses and said that they should let him introduce himself first. He is a full-time librarian. He also said that he is also the dean of the Eastern Academy, and now he is announcing the decision taken by the entire academy. All the students who were students at the Eastern Academy stood with their mouths open. They couldn't even imagine that this old man was the dean. Han also couldn't imagine that it was his grandfather who was the dean. He was so easy to talk to. The guy who was standing next to him said that he had known for a long time. Han and find out from him where this guy said that they are relatives. Han tried to clarify whether he is some kind of grandfather to him. Then this guy proudly said that it was not like that. On the contrary, he was his grandfather. Han turned his head and looked at Xiao Song and told him not to joke like that, to which the guy replied that he was not joking at all. In their branch, the Jiang family is the oldest generation, and the dean calls his mother the ancestress. And then he said that otherwise, how would he have become, in his opinion, a teaching assistant and a class monitor? Of course, in this world, power was above all else, but a little connection never hurt anyone. It was then announced that their two academies had decided to conduct a joint operation. At the same time, this operation will also become a transfer exam, and all first-year students will move on to the second year after these exams. And students who fail the test will be expelled from their academies immediately. Some students were very surprised. What does the expulsion exam mean? Didn't they just transfer to the second year before? Others wanted to know what assignments there would be. The dean of the Eastern Academy said that the content of the exam will be announced in 3 days, just before the start of the operation. And during these 3 days, the teachers will help the students get acquainted with the characteristics of the combat armor of both sides. In addition, in 3 days he will report news about the Holy Child. His friend, the second old man, told the librarian not to forget to mention the exchange students. The second old man was the dean of the Western Academy. He said that those who show excellent abilities in this operation will go to the Western Academy for a year as exchange students. And his excellent students will also spend a year studying at the Eastern Academy. The librarian turned and said that he was just about to tell you about it. One of the guys thought that if they were exchange students, then he had heard that the best enchantment masters in the world worked in a Western Academy, and he would be interested to take a look. And the student from the Western Academy thought that the martial arts training at the Eastern Academy was better than the skies. He had to fight for this exchange spot. After which the librarian said that that was all, and now everyone could go their separate ways and begin training. Miss Liu took a call on her headset and was informed that a high-level cataclysm had been detected in the northern desert. The armored warriors of the Dragon King level sent to subdue him all died. The lady replied that she would personally take care of it. The librarian heard that high-level monsters were appearing more and more often. He thought that they were losing more and more armored warriors. He thought that the twilight of the continent of the Battlelands was getting closer. He told the lady to keep an eye on the students. This time the old man wanted to stretch his bones a little. The Desert of Eternal Night was located in the north of the continent of Abay. You are in the land eternally immersed in darkness. So they went there immediately to sort out what was happening on the spot. The dean of the Eastern Academy, who arrived at this place, took one first-year student with him, and this student was Han. He said that they arrived according to intelligence data. This is approximately in time-place. The guy asked his grandfather why he brought him here. Deegan said that sooner or later he would have to face a high-level monster. He brought him so that he would sense it in advance. The guy said that there really was an ominous aura of a monster left here. The sand was soaked in the blood of armored warriors, strangely, but their bodies were gone. The guy looked around and noticed that even the remains of the warriors were nowhere to be seen. It was unclear where they had gone. The old man then said that this was from a monster of a higher level than the guy's abilities, so it's not surprising that he doesn't feel it, and the old man will try to do it himself. He decided that the only way they could see this monster was to provoke it, and he kicked it with all his might. The very next moment they saw that not far from where they were, the sand began to rise. And from under this sand a monster crawled out. It is an armored sand boa of rank C. The guy at that moment when he saw him thought, this monster is not as simple as he thought from the beginning. This monster already has poison resistance, an extremely high defense level, and an extremely high attack power. At this moment he is eager to tear everything in front of him into pieces. The guy thought that only one ominous dark energy was emanating from him. It was already pressing so that he could not breathe. His body was shaking on its own. He could not restrain himself. And he also thought that if he had entered into battle with him, the outcome would have been only one death. The dean of the Eastern Academy, a historian, told the boy that this was not yet the battle he could participate in. And the guy has to step away today. He has only one task. He has to stand aside. He just had to watch everything that was happening, after which the old man raised his 2 fingers to show what he was capable of. When the guy saw this energy that came from the deck at the Eastern Academy, he realized that it was a very big power. And also when he saw the armor that appeared on the old man, he was very surprised. After all, until that moment he had not taken this old man seriously. He had not even thought that he was a warrior. But in fact, he realized that the dean of the Eastern Academy was of the divine level, which was why he was able to hide his energy. But the old man had a divine level battle armor of the 9th stage Chi Yu, and he had a full armor enchantment. His movement speed was plus 50%. And also weapons combat blades IUX2, enchantment of twin blades bloodthirsty upon contact with the enemy's blood, absorbs 10% of his combat power duration 30 seconds, recharge 2 minutes. The old man with such capabilities and abilities immediately entered into combat with this monster. There was such power in his gaze, such evil, that it seemed he would tear him apart in a few seconds. This is exactly what happened when the old man approached the monster. Everything happened very quickly. At that moment, the guy didn't even have time to understand what had happened. He didn't notice his grandfather's attack at all. The guy didn't understand if the old man could really deal with this monster with one blow. That meant the old man was incredibly strong. After which the old man told the guy to move a little further away. The guy did not understand why he was talking like that. Then the old man explained to him that he would still have to deal with that guy in the sky. And if the one in the sky hides his sinister dark energy so deeply, then he is a very dangerous enemy. The board showed attention approaching danger detected humanoid monster Juan assessment level nightmare. This monster was getting closer and closer. The guy decided to listen to the Soviet River and moved away. The old man said that he had never seen such a strong monster before, so he didn't know how strong he was. The guy at that moment realized that this monster that was approaching was incomprehensibly populated, and he should also activate his armor. On the other hand, he understood that whatever he did at that moment, it would all be useless. He watched the many eyes of this monster located on his head. This monster approaching tried to attack first with fire arrows down. The guy thought that the sand boa didn't even come close to this monster. This one is strong enough to kill a beetle without even getting wet. He turned around, looked at the guy, and told him to hold on as tightly as possible, because who knows what else could be expected. And he also had to hold on only because the old man was about to start attacking at that moment. And the old man was going to give it his all. And since his powers were also great, the guy had to watch from the side. The guy thought that this was some incredible energy of the grandfather's power fluctuations that was about to sweep away his son, and judging by the perception of the energy, the grandfather was stronger than this monster, which meant that the combat power of the armored warrior exceeded the level of a nightmare. The monster, watching what was happening from above, saw that the old man had begun to attack and said something in an incomprehensible language. After which the monster, continuing to speak in an incomprehensible language, began to divide into small parts and disappear. And a second later, all that was visible was the sand that was left of this monster, and it simply wasn't there. The old man looked at what happened. He was also surprised by this and did not know what to do. The guy was surprised. Did this monster really escape, and was he really not that strong? The old man wondered what kind of gibberish he was talking about, but he was already ready for a good fight. Only high-ranking monsters speak the language of monsters. But for 1,000 years, no one has been able to decipher it. The boy turned his head and then turned to the grandfather librarian, whom he knew as an old man. Suddenly the guy said what the monster said. He seemed to understand everything. The old man was very surprised. After some time, they returned to the Eastern Academy to the dean's office. Now they needed to understand what had happened and how they should all proceed further because this monster had simply disappeared. The dean of the Eastern Academy told the dean of the Western Academy everything in detail in the presence of the guy and asked what he thought. The old man of the Western Academy said that recently a monster equal to him also appeared on the western continent of the Marshall Lands. Their efforts came together a little, but he also escaped. So he concluded that they were not looking for a protracted fight. Not knowing what plot they were weaving, it really made them worry. The old man told the boy to repeat the words again for old Neo. The guy said that the meaning is something like this. It's not time yet, don't rush, wait until it wakes up. Everyone will be wiped off the face of the earth, no one will survive. Then, Old Man Near concluded that these creatures have even more powerful leaders behind the scenes, and when this mysterious monster will awaken is completely unknown to them. They had no information during the awakening. Maybe in that case decades will pass, or maybe it will happen tomorrow. The old man asked everyone to hide it, otherwise the whole world will live in fear. The boy asked the old man if there was a large empty area in the academy that he could occupy for 3 days. The old man asked what he had in mind. Then the guy replied that he wanted to become stronger. When he first saw that sand boa, he really felt the threat of death. Even at this moment of memories, he is shaking. The guy was saying that he was also scared when he saw that nightmare-level monster, so he has to speed up his path to power. The old man said that these days the first-year students will be busy training each other in combat, in which case that place will just be freed up. Namely, he spoke about the place where they gathered every time. It was a training ground. The guy was allowed to train separately. He decided that he could start doing this immediately and went to the training ground. When he got there, he ordered his skeleton soldiers to come out, and he had to start training them. When they came out, he said that he had called them to train with him and that they could use anything that did not cause fatal injuries. They had to level up just like the guy and become much stronger to help him. He also told them that for the next 3 days they would fight him without sleep or rest until the very beginning of the exam. The first thing he did was he activated the combat armor, and when he did that, he said that everything was starting. 2 old men watched Dim as he trained from above. One of them believed that the ability to understand the language of monsters and such amazing skills made him truly worthy of the title of Holy Child. The second believed that he was still young. On the continent of the Battle Lands, fewer and fewer armored warriors are awakening, and those who are able to reach the divine level are in all units, and they are in their advanced years, and how long they will last is unknown. That is why they decided to remove children with low abilities. In fact, it is for their own protection, to reduce unnecessary casualties, since the battlefield is brutal. Only the strong have the right to live. They were watching everything that was happening from above and thought that this guy should try and train as hard as he could. Despite the fact that he was a gentleman and he trained with his skeleton soldiers, they were in no way inferior to him. Each of them tried to show his abilities as much as possible, and even some of them tried to cheat. The guy repeated to them once again that only what is not fatal is allowed, and that he will never call anyone who dares to give in to him again in his life. He looked at his soldiers and said that this was an order. He was waiting for them to answer whether they understood it. His soldiers unanimously answered him that everything was clear to them, so they were ready to engage in a training fight with him. In fact, skeleton soldiers are ideal sparring partners. If you cut them down, you can call them back. If he gets wounded, the skeleton warlock can heal him. This training is as close as possible to a real fight. First, he fights one-on-one with a strong skeleton soldier, constantly honing his combat skills. He believed that when he got used to it, then he would begin to gradually increase the number of skeleton soldiers in battle. One-on-one duels and chaotic fights were all things he would definitely experience in the future. Then he stopped counting how many wounds he received. His body was constantly tormented by pain and healing, but the blood and pain only sharpened his mind. In this world, he had a family, friends, but he was threatened with destruction. Well, fate is unfair in its judgment, but in this injustice, he decided to apply all his strength to build a path to life. 3 days passed, which meant only one thing: his training was over and that the exams were starting. He walked away pleased with himself because he had done everything he could in that short time. The system congratulated its master as his combat armor was upgraded to the level of Human King 5th degree, and he received a new skill spatial backpack. And also, the conditions for opening the treasure chest were met. Now it was necessary to make a decision whether to open the chest or not. He decided to open it immediately. He was interested in what was inside. He stood in the middle of the forest waiting for what would happen and what was really in that chest. Imagine his surprise when he saw that the system congratulated the owner on what he had received. It was a swift Chi-2. This skill increases the owner's movement speed and attack by 200% for 20 seconds. The guy thought that this was certainly cooler than the complete enchantment of the grandfather in the ambulance, although only 20 seconds is not enough. But if you use it correctly, you can do such things. And he also received a reward for leveling up the skeleton soldiers of the infantry type, siege healers, warlocks. He had all of this, only cavalry and archers remained, and his set of troops will be complete. He knew that he only needed to continue to level up to collect all the types and then bring their number to 500,000, and then challenge the high-ranking monsters quietly and blossom. The exam was about to start soon. The central part of the continent of the Battlelands, the Basin of Blades, was practically uninhabited, and that is where the monsters lived. They were in one of the deepest underground caves into which that same monster descended. When he evaporated and only one trace remained of him, he transformed into this very cave. Returning from it back, he shouted to his subordinate monsters that they were all ordinary trash. He stood in the middle of these monsters and didn't understand why there were still so many creatures in this world, especially these nasty little people. And his monsters were useless if they didn't kill them. After which he turned away from them and said that he did not want to have anything to do with them anymore. He went further because he believed that everything would change only when he tried what was in this enchanted egg. He believed that he would be able to very well cleanse this world of everything that was in it, despite the resistance of people. As the morning came and the exam began, the students tried to get to the place very quickly to receive the assignment. All students were ordered to speed up the exam. The time limit is set and they must be completed before dark. New acquaintance Han ran and thought that now he had to drag himself on foot. If only he could rise to the level of the Dragon King and awaken the technique of air control. This guy asked one girl where their leader was and why he was not visible at the start. The girl answered that their leader was behind. She also said that their elder has a special task. He and Han are walking behind. They will arrive a little later than them. This guy was surprised what a special assignment means and what these people from the Eastern Academy are doing. Han was a little surprised because we had one left and he was behind all the other students. Han stood behind him with the elder, and the elder told him that the old man said that he would give them a special task. The headman then said that the old man was his relative and the guy considered him a saint. The child would probably get some kind of bonus. Han then told the old man that the old man told the old man to carry the boy on himself so that he could rest more. Then the headman thought that he was a bastard, and it was unclear what he had been doing for the last 3 days if he had fallen asleep so quickly. Students from both academies gathered at the training grounds. This was their last formation before departure. The dean of the Eastern Academy stepped forward, adjusted his glasses, and said that the content of the exam he had already informed their team captains. He also said that he would be observing this exam and that first-year students from both academies would be taught, and their successes or failures would be assessed exclusively by the two of them. The headman thought that he had not yet seen Mrs. Liu's combat armor, and he was curious about what kind of armor teacher Elir had. The old man also said that regarding the news about the Holy Child, he had already appeared on the continent of the Battlelands. He also said that his identity cannot be revealed yet, but he can only say that he is undergoing secret training, and when the time comes, his identity is revealed to the SBU, the entire continent of the Battlelands will know. The old man also said that one day the Holy Child would lead their decisive battle with the monsters. He was completely confident that they would exterminate these creatures to the last. All the students supported him. The headman carefully read the task that was given to his group. Now all that was left was to complete it. One of the guys said that they had arrived and the goal of this exam was right in front of them. It was a lonely fortress that was held by them. Their task was to capture the fortress. According to the data provided by the dean of the faculty, this fortress has only 2 gates, and since there's a cliff at the back and little space, the security at the back gate is relatively weak. The front gate of the fortress is guarded by large forces. They need to determine the route of attack when they break through into the city. One of the guys suggested that they could send a small detachment to make a diversionary attack on the front gate and let the rest of the forces climb up the cliff from behind and suddenly strike the back gate and break into the city. This guy read that the front company is more dangerous, and he suggests that he, to the happiness of the people from the Western Academy, carry out a diversionary attack there, while the rest with the students from the Eastern Academy attack the rear gate. When the headman heard such a proposal, he was very surprised why some should conduct diversionary maneuvers and others attack from behind. Han intervened in their argument and told these two guys that they had enough of arguing and that not everyone was going to attack the back gate. They turned and looked at him, to which he replied that he alone was ready to go to the front gates. They thought that he was joking, and could he really fight an entire army alone?